Elite performance out of our people and teams are things which leaders dream of. Whenever we think of the world's leading organizations such as Google, Tesla, and Cisco, we think of the output that their people create for their organization. This output is simply not wished, but is generated through the hard work and dedication, but most importantly, the elite performance which is required for success. Today, my guest, Matt Comand, and I talk about elite performance topics such as how leaders can use the aspects of elite sports and leadership, how leaders can eliminate and mitigate the negative emotions and thoughts, what are anchors and leaders can use them, and how leaders can avoid attention sucks, amongst other subjects. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 86, Achieving High Consistent Elite Performance with Matt Comand. Welcome one, welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and welcome to you. Welcome to you, the leader who is here because you're either thinking about jumping in that leadership role, you are in one and you want to hone your skills, or you're a seasoned leader and you want to keep at the top of your game. Regardless who you are, you've come to the right place. Why? Because I take my 18 years of military leadership experience, coupled with world-class guests such as Matt today, and bring you the topics that you are looking for to achieve just what it is you're looking to achieve. So thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming out. It's great to have you here. Before I dive into the topic today and talking about elite performance and introducing my guest, Matt, just wanted to let you know that today's show is brought to you by the Moving Forward Leadership Power Goals program. So if you're out there looking to achieve some great goals and you just haven't been able to do it. Maybe you got that couple goals in your mind that you haven't been able to figure out how you can achieve it. You just, for whatever reason, it doesn't work. Well, you know what? Maybe the Power Goals program is just for you. If you go to movingforwardleadership.com/power, it's going to bring you to my landing page and I'll explain the program right through for you. But I'll give you a couple of highlights, so to speak. I'm going to teach you how to actually select the right goals for you, how you can go out and figure out what it is you need to achieve, how to schedule it, and most importantly, find that time to achieve your goals, how to execute, how to get back up on your feet when you fail, because guess what? We all fail. I fail daily. But it's about the techniques and tactics, how we get back up on our feet to ensure that we keep going, and then finally how to properly reflect to make sure we are, one, progressing, but two, figuring out those roadblocks and figuring out ways that we can make sure they don't pop back up again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so just go to movingforwardleadership.com/power and check that out, all right? Enough of that. Let's dive into today's topic, shall we? And today's topic is about consistent elite performance out of our teams and you as the leader. The show is kind of divided in two, but before I dive into the nuts and bolts, let's talk about my guest, Matt. Matt's an experienced high-performance coach with a history of working with elite athletes, coaches, teams, and executives. He's skilled in athletic development, but it doesn't mean that's not for leadership, because he's in that world too. Mental skills training and team cohesion. He's passionate about helping individuals and teams achieve their optimal potential and more thoroughly enjoys the process of achieving consistent excellence. Pretty neat stuff. And you're going to hear a lot of cool things in this interview between Matt and I. I heard Matt on a different podcast and said, you know what? Got to get him out. So here he is for you, because I believe that we can take those ideologies that they use in sports at those, professional levels. We're talking about NBA, NHL, NFL athletes, those ideologies, and bring them to our teams and organizations to achieve the same thing. Sure, you might not be putting a puck in the net or throwing the 50-yard pass for a touchdown, but whatever it is your organization does, you can achieve the equivalent to it through these ideologies that Matt's going to bring to you today. So that's enough for this. I'm going to let you just sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview with Matt Comand and talking about achieving high, consistent, elite performance. Man, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Great to have you here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So what I like to do with all my guests before we dive into the nuts and bolts of the podcast, just get them to give a quick background about themselves, who they are, what they do, how they got to where they are today. So why don't you kick us off with that, and then we'll start diving into elite teams.
Sure. So my background is in sports psychology. So I got my master's at the University of Denver a few years ago, and really applied programs. So we did a lot of work with athletes and teams and coaches working with on the mental skills needed for high performance. So things like, directing their attention to relevant cues, things like emotional regulation and breathing and mindfulness, developing more consistent confidence, all those types of things that kind of are focused more on the psychological side of sport. And then over the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've kind of continued that as a kind of private practice consultant here in Toronto, working with elite level athletes, typically like ages 10 to 20, and teenagers, and a lot of fun. And then I've also been teaching sports psychology at Humber College for the last 5 years. So that's also a lot of fun, get to test out a lot of different things with the students, a lot of team building activities and things like that. And then the third kind of side job that I have is I've been coaching hockey for 10 years as well. So AAA and junior A hockey. So that's kind of what I do professionally, and have a lot of fun doing it.
All right. So before we thoroughly dive deep here, we got 2 Canadians. You just mentioned you coach hockey.
I do. Honestly, like obviously I'm a Leafs fan. I'm from Toronto, but I'm not a massive fan. Like, because I coach, and I have for basically almost my entire adult life. Like, I'm never home during the evenings, so I don't watch a lot of games. I'll catch highlights and stuff, but I'm not a diehard crazy fan. Like, I listen to the radio and I kind of watch SportsCenter once in a while, just like everybody, but I'm not overly pinning my face or going crazy. So I am a Leaf fan, I guess, but a reserved one, I suppose.
So for all the listener out there who's literally across the world, we're not going to dive too deep into hockey. I will say I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan, but seeing that you are not that deep as what I am, because I follow the sport religiously, we won't have any fights over the air tonight.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right, let's get real now.
Sure.
So the audience, there's a lot of middle managers who follow this podcast. There's a fair number of senior leadership who even follow this podcast. And then there's the people who are looking to break into leadership roles. So they're like, okay, this guy Matt's on the show. He's just talking about a lot of sports psychology and building elite teams, and we're talking hockey. I got nothing to do with that. I'm in business. I have a team of employees. So how can we take those aspects of elite sports and use them in leadership with our teams on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So the kind of the principles of high performance are pretty standard across any domain. So whether you're an athlete, in sales, you're in, preparing for a public speaking engagement, you're a pilot, you're a surgeon, whatever it is that you do, most people will experience self-doubt at some point. Most people will experience a coworker they have a hard time getting along with, or a lack of confidence at times, or they're frustrated. They feel a lack of engagement, a lack of motivation. Those things are human things, and where you work or what you do, it almost doesn't matter as much. So there's kind of 3 things that, for me, in my experience, either working with athletes or executives, 3 kind of tenets that lend themselves to high performance. The first one is emotional regulation. So having a level of self-awareness, understanding when I'm at my best. Am I totally wrapped up and engaged? Am I more low key? Just having that awareness as to where you are. The second one is deliberate attention. And this, to me, might be the biggest one. It's, having the ability to focus on what you want to focus on when you need it when you need to be focused on that. So directing your attention to relevant cues, identifying those relevant cues. Again, when you're at your best, where is your attention? And I think that's the biggest one, because a lot of people, they think about the what ifs. What if I don't do well? What if my boss isn't impressed? What if I don't get the job? What if? And really that's really not a great way to be at your best. Although humans are really good at catastrophizing. So, identifying those relevant cues, and then purposely, deliberately, intently directing your attention to those things, and understanding what information you need to process to make good decisions in your world, whatever that world is. And the last one is having a growth mindset. So that's kind of a buzzword that's kind of grown in the last few years, spawned by the research by Carol Dweck out at Stanford. And really what that means is removing any permanence from any evaluation. So a lot of people will put limits on themselves or limits on others based on maybe one or two performances. I hear people say all the time, I'm a bad public speaker. I get really nervous for interviews. I can't do it. And there's this permanent assessment to their evaluation versus, okay, well, maybe I didn't do so well that time, and it's not to sugarcoat anything. But it's to look at your performance unemotionally, to diagnose it and say, okay, can I prepare better? What are the techniques I use? What information did I process? What information did I not process? And using that information to improve and to get better, rather than putting that permanent assessment on yourself or on others.
That's a lot of interesting stuff in there. And a couple things obviously aren't surprising. One, for the audience out there, growth mindset. If they weren't, they obviously all have growth mindset, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be listening to this podcast. So we can definitely skim over that one. But the one I definitely want to boomerang back to was what you were talking about, and that whole negative emotions and negative thoughts, self-doubt, that whole self-destructive mode, right?
Yeah.
And we are really good at catastrophizing things. Ugh. I'm not going to edit that out, by the way.
Sure.
We're just going to do that for fun.
Sounds good.
Anyway, we're really great at, looking at the worst case scenario. And even in my line of work, we have a plan for it, right? We literally have a planning cycle of the enemies in the army, the enemy's most dangerous course of action, which is the worst case scenario, right? So we are really great at that. But how do we get out of that mindset? How do we actually, once we recognize we're in that hole and we're like, just, that self-doubt is there. Oh, I'm not a great leader. I'm a horrible boss. My team isn't performing well because it's because of me, or I haven't done something. How do we actually get out of that, see the light, so that we can move forward towards that growth mindset and moving forward and achieving the things that we're meant to achieve?
Yes, I think there's two really effective ways. One is to determine those relevant cues that, again, when I'm at my best, where's my attention? So when you are caught in that hole of negative self-talk, I can't do it, or I botched it, or of course, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to apply for that job, or it's that constant negativity. It's really hard for everyone to kind of get back on track in a way, because when we have that negative emotion, that stress, we're at a heightened level of intensity, we're stressed, our focus is narrowed. There's a lot of things that go along with that. So one thing I would recommend is identifying where your attention is when you're at your best, what are you focused on, and creating an external visual for that, whether it's a list on your computer, whether it's pinned up at your desk. It's 3 or 4 or 5 kind of cue words that remind you when you're in that state of negativity or frustration or lack of engagement or whatever, that you can, it's a visual reminder that of where to direct your attention when you're at your best. So that's one exercise that you can do. And the other one I would say is developing a present focus. So it goes a lot with mindfulness, but instead of worrying about what maybe the outcome will be, and what this particular performance might mean, or what you perceive it might mean down in the future, try to be more focused on what's going on right this moment. And again, where you need to direct that attention and what your task is and what the job that has to get done is in this moment, what you're experiencing, versus, something that's happened, in the past that you don't like or something you're worried about in the future. Those two things can kind of distract us from what we need to take care of in the moment as well. So one would be kind of a visual list of your relevant cues or your anchors. And another one would be to try to experience what's going on in the present moment.
That's interesting stuff. So basically, we often hear about vision boards. So what you're saying is kind of, making yourself a vision board of all these cues.
Yeah, it could be a vision board. It could be something visual. It could be something more concise, where the anchors that I work on with clients are literally like one word or two words, or like a little phrase that maybe to somebody else wouldn't really mean much, but to them, they know what it means. They know what it represents. Whether it's, I was working with a speed skater, and hers was hammer. So that just meant to her to like put the hammer down, like really sprint out the last couple laps, and really like that's what it meant to her. And she had it written on her glove, I think. And you see a lot of athletes kind of write things on their wristbands or on their gloves or on their cleats. So having that visual reminder, again, whether it's at your desk or on the back of your phone or in your wallet or whatever, I think is really helpful.
You kind of just start it to go down the road, but I kind of want to throw the question out there because I'm sure there are audience members out there wondering what the heck is an anchor. So can you just quickly go over what an anchor is? Sure, and then more importantly, how can leaders use them for their and their team's benefits?
So the way I kind of conceptualize anchors is similar to an anchor in a boat. I teach this, like I said, to a lot of young kids and teenagers. And, when you're in a boat, an anchor keeps you from drifting around when there's a storm going on. So whether that storm is external, whether it's a chaotic, chaos kind of going on in the office or things are, you're in a fast-paced environment and things are going really quickly, or it's that internal storm that you and I have talked about already, where there's negative self-talk, there's self-doubt, there's frustration. Your focus anchors are things that you can return to, that are stable, that are always there, that you're at your best when your attention is there. So that's kind of why we call them anchors or focus anchors. And what a good way to kind of determine them or figure them out is just to say, like, where's your attention when you're at your best? When you're totally engaged, what information are you processing? What are you focused on? And typically it shouldn't really be the outcome or the result you want to achieve. It's like, oh, I want to get this sale, or I want to acquire new clients, or I want to really kind of, kill this presentation. That's all the results. Where if you're in front of a boardroom and you're thinking, wow, as you're speaking, wow, I really want to, knock this out of the park, you're probably going to maybe get some paralysis by analysis. So it's probably not going to be the outcome. It's probably, again, that task relevant kind of present focus, cue that you need to direct your attention to be at your best.
That's, I like that a lot. So the way I read that, these anchors are really important, I would say, during a crisis time, right?
Yes.
To keep you grounded, keep you focused. And as leaders, that's the moment that you need to shine. That's the moment where you really need to come out. So
absolutely. And I say this to my clients all the time, like, focusing is rather easy for the most part. It's refocusing that can be difficult. So understanding where I need to direct my attention when it's chaos, when it's, the storm's going on, when there's lots of things going on at once, there's tons of things on the to-do list. It's just chaotic. Having those anchors as a kind of, like you said, like a stable point to get back to, can give yourself a lot of confidence, and in turn give your team confidence in you and in themselves.
That was just a great dovetail moment for this conversation, because we've been really focused on the individual and the leader and stuff like that. What I really would like to move now towards is the teams, and what are some of the components from your vantage point of elite teams? What makes a team elite and in their mindset?
Yeah, so I think the environment and the kind of the dialogue and the communication around risk and around mistakes, where, you know, if you want to be elite and you want to get better, you have to take risks. Like, you have to make mistakes. It's kind of non-negotiable. So if you have a boss or teammates who, you know, really penalize mistakes or taking risks or innovation, you know, down the line, people are going to look at each other and say, well, last time we did this, we kind of got chewed out, so we're going to play it safe. And you can play it safe and be pretty good, probably, and be comfortable, but are you ever going to be elite? I would say probably not. So that idea that taking risks, calculated risks, smart risks, but taking risks is absolutely essential. And this idea that we're all in it together, I think is paramount to having an elite team. And that idea that that when we take risks, and again, almost independent of the outcome of it, how is it perceived? How is it communicated? How is that kind of gone on? I think is really important.
So the way I hear what you're saying there is, one, the teams need to feel safe enough to go out on a limb, you know, take those risks, make those jumps, push things forward harder, faster, whatever. And two, there needs to be unparalleled trust amongst everybody, that everybody's got each other's back. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like, how do you build trust? I think is a question that comes up a lot. And I think a lot of people might think, okay, well, you know, once trust is built, then I can allow myself to maybe be vulnerable or open up or display a lot of humility, or be humble. And, you know, that seems to be kind of backwards. So I think, you know, it's counterintuitive, and we don't really do it in everyday life. But the more you can be vulnerable and the more you can be humble and demonstrate humility, I think that's how you actually build trust. And not hoping that trust is going to get built, and then, now that we have this relationship, now I can open up a little bit more. I think if we kind of reverse that trend, that trust will be built much more quickly and much more deeply.
I always like to say trust should be immediate. I always hated that mentality. You have to earn my trust. I think that, as you've been saying, it's counterintuitive. It's I'll be blunt to say ass backwards. 99% of the world out there are there to do a good job. And if you're in this type of team or this type of organization that really want to push forward and push hard, then you have to have that immediate trust, because you have to believe that everybody else has your best interests in mind. In my world, we come from, we're talking at the extreme level where I have to trust the guys to the left and right of me with literally my life.
Yeah.
If they don't do their job, I am either coming home with less limbs or in a casket. It's that simple. So I always like to push forward and tell people, no, you have to trust your teams immediately, because they're there to do a good job. If they need direction or they need help, that's something else. But the trust has to be there so that they can feel vulnerable. They can be, you know, open to say, hey, I don't necessarily have all the skill sets. I don't have all the tools to achieve what you're looking for me to achieve, boss. You need to provide these things to me. But if that trust and that security isn't there, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, how do you do that? I think like you've said already, asking for help, apologizing when necessary or when appropriate, you know, standing up and kind of owning something that maybe didn't go well. Again, it's not about sugarcoating anything or blaming others. Obviously, it's to stand up and say, hey, look, this was my responsibility. It didn't go that well, but I'm here to continue to learn and be a growing part of this team. And again, in the moment, maybe that loss or that, you know, missed opportunity is a pretty big deal, you know, in terms of, you know, you didn't get the client or we lost market share or whatever it's going to be. And that's a big deal. most organizations are pretty results based, but again, I think the less you focus on results, the better they get, which again is pretty counterintuitive. But if we can focus more on what's going on inside the four walls of the organization in terms of trust, in terms of, open communication, in terms of vulnerability, in terms of balancing conviction with humility, I think that's how you get elite teams, period.
Yeah, I really like the whole point about humility and the emphasis on it. I think it's absolutely essential as a leader that leaders have, a level of humility and not to be shy to open up to the team and show their people that they're actually human. Because in my experience, in my viewpoint, that actually helps build the teams quicker, better, and have that more deeper connection amongst everybody else.
Totally agree.
So in, the business world, the corporate world, whatever, I got people across the spectrum, right? From nonprofits to government to a lot of business folks that listen to this podcast. Obviously, there's a lot of formal training that goes on, informal training goes on. And then there's always that balance between that and experience. So where does that come into your mindset? How, what should be the nice balance between training and experience to form these elite teams from your viewpoint?
That is a good question. I think there's obviously like a requisite set of skills for any role. I would say some of the soft skills might be more important than experience. Things like, can you display empathy? Can you build bonds with teammates or coworkers? And can you give them what they need sometimes without them asking for it and without it being in your job description? Or a lot of people might say, hey, this is my job. This is my 9 to 5. I checked off all the boxes and that must mean I'm a good employee. And in maybe some cases it does. I think that's a really good question.
Leaders out there are always forming their teams. They're always trying to make better teams. They're great leaders, develop their teams individually as well as a group. So how can we take some of these high performance concepts that you've discussed, and then what techniques are required for a leader to actually, train their team to operate at that elite level of all those different things that you've discussed so far?
So I think individualized communication is really, really critical, where not just giving the same feedback to the whole team. So that I think that does a few things. When you give individualized feedback, it tells your team members that you actually pay attention, not just to the team performance, but to actual individuals, and you kind of care and you're observing what's going on. If you can give that detailed, individualized communication feedback, it also, I think, lets them know that you have some credibility, again, where you have a depth of knowledge that you can apply and diversify your feedback a little bit and not paint everyone with the same brush. So I think individualized feedback is huge. I think also being able to really display a lot of these things on your own first. So if you're expecting humility and you're expecting vulnerability and trust and open communication, you have to be the one leading the way, which I think is might sound pretty obvious, but I think in practice it doesn't happen as much as we'd all like to, or maybe you're asking things of your team that you're not willing to do. So I think, your own personal example is huge. And I think a lot of eliciting information rather than giving information is a big one. So I think whenever there's some tension or whenever there's resistance, whether that's resistance to change or your role, or there's something going on at work that, adds some friction to it, I think giving information is not as effective as eliciting information. We can give people information, the change is going to be great for you this way, and it's going to benefit you A, B, and C, and what we need from you now is this, and your role is changing, and you just give information rather than ask questions and rather than elicit that information from them with really good open-ended questions, trying to understand what their perspective is, trying to understand where they're coming from, what their goals are, what their struggles are, all those things. So again, it has to be that two-way communication. I think, again, then that'll have a ton of benefits in the end in terms of, building that trust, building that vulnerability, having increased role acceptance, all those great things.
Oh, that's really great. A lot of great info in there. And, for the audience, definitely I will harp always on the need for open and honest communication within teams. That's just crucial, right? Mm-hmm. Matt, we're just winding down to the last few questions here. I got one more, revolving around elite teams and high performance and the mindset. So if you could summarize and, basically paint with words a picture of what an elite team would or should look like, what would that be?
Ooh, I think, like, if I'm painting with words, I think the words relentless and resilience come to mind. So, in terms of relentless, like, there's always going to be something coming down the street, right? There's always new business. There might be like a fiscal quarter or something, but there's no finish line for businesses. It's not like you're going to wrap up and close up shop and say, okay, we finished first, and now we're all going to go find somewhere else to work. Like, it doesn't work that way. So, no matter what's happening in terms of the markets, in terms of, sales and profits and revenue, whatever is happening, having this mindset of relentlessness, and we're going to be able to adapt to whatever challenges come our way. And really those challenges are here to make us better and for us to improve and be forced in a way to have a greater impact on our stakeholders, whoever they are, employees, our shareholders, our clients, whoever we care about and whoever we're providing for. These difficulties are going to put us in a position that's going to force us to get better and improve our relationship with these stakeholders. So having that mentality of relentlessness, I think, is huge. And then, similarly, that the idea of resilience, taking your performance as feedback to improve future performances. So again, it's not this evaluation of yourself or your team as this permanent kind of indictment as, oh, this team did really well, but this team, couldn't hack it and they're not going to be able to perform moving forward. Again, taking the information, and again, removing emotion from it, removing any kind of tension from it, and just diagnosing it for what it is. And then again, how did we prepare? How did we perform? What did we see that maybe we should have seen, or that we didn't expect that we probably could have or should have expected? So taking an unemotional diagnosis of your performance, I think, is crucial, and that'll improve your resiliency moving forward.
That's awesome. Love that answer. Oh, man, this has been a pleasure. It's been a slice. I got one last question, which I ask all my guests here at Moving Forward Leadership.
Sure.
And that is, to you, Matt Comand, what makes a great leader?
Ooh, what makes a great leader? Again, that word risk comes up, like, for me anyway. People are really afraid of risk. And why is that? Because there's, a chance of failure. But again, if you're in a position of leadership and you reframe the mentality of risk and understand that that's how we get better, people are going to start doing things that are just slightly out of their capabilities, just slightly out of their comfort zone. And then it just becomes the new normal, right? And then next week and the week after, you keep doing it and keep doing it. And it just becomes the new normal. And suddenly you have all these capabilities and these skills, and this awareness or these perspectives that you'd never had before. And again, that totally is dictated by the leadership, in my opinion, where if this idea of risk taking and mistakes and errors is seen as something to avoid and something to, not go forward with at full speed, then you're going to stay in your comfort zone and things will probably be pretty okay, to be honest. But, you're not going to become elite. You're not going to continue to grow. So that, to me, I think is how what makes a great leader, I think, is how you frame mistakes and growth and errors and risk.
Love it. The greats didn't become great because they sat in a nice comfy couch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, my man. So this is part of the show where I flip the mic over to you, let you take your moment of glory. Feel free to give yourself a shameless plug. Where can the audience find you? Where can they follow you? Learn about your resources, whatever you got to promote.
Sure. So myself and a few colleagues we created a firm called Consistent Elite Performance. So it's just consistenteliteperformance.com. And again, we work with executives, teams, coaches, athletes, kind of in the Toronto area right now, but really open to working anywhere. And happy to do large scale kind of big presentations, like lecture style presentations. We do a lot of small group kind of team workshops, and we do a lot of one-on-one coaching as well, kind of developing that consistent performance excellence mindset. So Consistent Elite Performance is the website, and you can find all the information there.
Perfect. For the audience, as always, easy for you guys. Just head to the show notes, and the links are going to be there right in the guest resources section. Matt, my man, been a pleasure. It's been a slice. It's always great having a fellow Canadian on the show.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming out.
Thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed that interview between Matt and I. Pretty neat stuff, right? Anyway, if you're interested in the show notes, I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the show, but if you go to movingforwardleadership.com/8686, you can grab the show notes from there. All right. Again, movingforwardleadership.com/86. Anyways, always, if this resonated with you, if you felt like the message was something that hit home for you, then don't forget R²S², right? Rate and review the show so that other people can find out about moving forward leadership, and I can help more people become better leaders. Share this with someone who you think could use this message today. Someone that, you know what, maybe their team isn't the most elite, or they have an interest in this topic. Feel free to shoot the link to them and share it. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe to the Moving Forward Leadership podcast at movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And never miss another episode again. And folks, that's it for today and this week. Hope you guys have a rocking week. And remember, as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.